A little boy is carried out of a locked country house, his throat cut, and every adult inside swears they heard nothing. One detective walks in and decides the killer didn't escape at all. By the end, you'll understand how one Victorian murder forced Britain to reinvent criminal investigation, and why the man who solved it was nearly destroyed by the methods that made him famous. A child is dead. A family's name is on the brink of ruin. And if the wrong person is accused, the new science of detection will be branded as cruelty. Dressed up as progress, did Inspector Jonathan Wiltshire uncover the truth of Road Hill House, or did he create the most convincing mistake of his career? There is a sound that does not belong in a quiet English village. A scream, cut short. Then a house full of people begins to move as one. It is June of 1860, at a country place called Road Hill House, near the village of Road in Wiltshire. A little boy is missing. His name is Francis Saville Kent. He is 3 years old. They search the rooms, they search the landings, they lift curtains and look beneath beds. Someone runs to the outside doors, they check the closets, they check the closets, they check the privy. The house keeps giving back the same answer. No child. And then, within hours, the search turns into something else. In an outdoor privy, in a confined space where no child should be, they find a small body. The throat has been cut. The face is bruised. The night has left its mark. And in that moment, in that one house, the old ways of catching killers begin to strain. Because everyone is close. Everyone is family. Everyone is family. Everyone is watched. So who in this house had the courage or the coldness to do it? Road Hill House sits solid and respectable, a symbol of new money and old ambition. Its owner, Samuel Kent, is a man who has rebuilt his life. Not long before, his first wife dies. He remarries. The new wife, Mary Ann Kent, is younger, and the children of the first marriage are still there. So are the children of the second. It is a household arranged on paper, but uneasy in practice. Bedrooms are shared, nurseries overlap, servants move through corridors that connect everyone, and like many Victorian homes, the building itself seems to carry secrets. Stairs twist, doors lock. Passages allow people to cross without being seen. In the early hours of that June morning, someone enters the nursery. Someone takes Francis from his bed. No one claims to have heard footsteps. No one admits to seeing a light. The nursemaid, Elizabeth Goff, will say she did not wake. The other children sleep on. Yet the boy is removed, carried down, and hidden in the most degrading place on the property. This is not a panicked accident. This looks deliberate. And the investigators who arrive first are local men, shaped by local habits. They know how to question strangers on the road. They know how to look for a vagrant. They know how to suspect an outsider. But what if the killer never left the house at all? If the murderer was already in the breakfast room when the shouting began, how would anyone prove it? The village hears the news and begins to do what villages do. It creates a story it can carry. It whispers about gypsies. It watches itinerant workers. It turns every unfamiliar face into a possibility. But the facts resist that comfort. There are no clear footprints leading away. No blood trail across the lane. No witness who saw a man slipping through hedges before dawn. And the body is not hidden far off in the woods. It is hidden almost inside the home. The police begin with the servants, then with the children, then with the parents. Each interview is a test, not only of what someone says, but of what Victorian society expects them to be: a grieving father, a composed mother, a dutiful nurse, a respectable girl. But grief can look like numbness. Shock can look like guilt. And a family can be a stage where everyone is acting, even when they do not know it. The local inquiry feels stuck. The case is too big for the tools they have. And soon, London hears, the Home Office hears. The Metropolitan Police is asked to send a detective, a professional, a man meant to see what others miss. So who is coming to Road Hill House, and what will he dare to accuse? Quick recap. Here's what we know so far, and the one detail that still doesn't fit. The doors were locked, the servants were in bed, and yet the child vanished from under the family's roof. So who had the one thing no outsider could fake, access without suspicion? Pause the murder for a second, because the most dangerous weapon in this case isn't a knife. It's a rumor that starts in the kitchen and ends in Parliament. Inspector Jonathan Wiltshire arrives with the weight of a new idea. He is not a uniformed constable. He is one of the plainclothes men. A detective. In 1860, that word still tastes suspicious to many respectable mouths. Detectives are thought to be sneaks, spies, men who pry into private life. But Wiltshire has built a reputation. He is methodical, quiet, hard to fool. He comes to Road Hill House and does not begin with theories. He begins with the building. He walks it. He measures distances. He asks which doors lock, which windows stick, where a person can move without being heard. He studies the nursery. The little bed. The position of blankets. He looks at the servants' routes. He looks at the family's routes. He looks at the timing's routes, because if Francis was taken, carried, killed, and concealed, it happened in a narrow window, and in that window, only certain people could have done it. Wiltshire's approach feels invasive. He wants private details. He wants trivial details. He wants tensions. He wants resentments. He wants to know who hated whom. In a Victorian household, that is close to blasphemy. So when Wiltshire starts asking about the older children, the room temperature changes. What is he seeing that makes him look not outward, but inward? Wiltshire doesn't start with footprints or blood. He starts with behavior, and one person's grief looks wrong to him. But if he's misreading it, what does that say about every gut feeling in policing? Now forget the family, forget the servants. One small inconsistency in the timeline is about to tell us whether the killer walked out the front door or never left the building at all. One name begins to draw Wiltshire's attention. Constance Kent. She is the eldest daughter from Samuel Kent's first marriage. She is a teenager. Old enough to remember her dead mother. Old enough to remember her dead mother. Old enough to feel displaced. Old enough to resent, or so the story will soon say. Wiltshire does not call her a monster. He does not need melodrama. He looks for access, opportunity, and for signs that do not match the household's performance of innocence. He hears about a missing nightdress, a garment that cannot be found. He hears that Constance had been in trouble before. He hears about quarrels, about discipline, about the sharp edges of a blended family. He sees that Constance can move around the house without drawing the notice a servant might. He learns she has the intelligence to plan. And he notes something else. The house's version of events shifts. Small details change, the kind of changes that happen when people are frightened, or when they are hiding. Wiltshire begins to believe the killer is not a stranger, not a passing criminal, but someone who belongs, someone who has the confidence of familiarity. If that is true, then the case becomes more than a murder. It becomes a threat to the idea of the respectable home. And that is why the next step will cause outrage. Because if you accuse a gentleman's daughter, what happens when you are wrong? The house is full of witnesses, but their stories don't collide. They align a little too neatly. Who coached whom before the first constable ever reached the gate? Wicker presses. He questions Constance. He questions the servants again. He asks about blood, about washing, about what was burned, about what was hidden. He watches reactions. He listens for the pause before an answer. He listens for the answer that arrives too quickly. At some point, he makes his decision. He names Constance Kent as his chief suspect. To modern ears, that might sound like a detective doing his job. But in 1860, it is a kind of violence. A young heir is not treated like a common suspect. A family is not meant to have a murderer in it. The accusation detonates. The local authorities bristle. The press circles. The public chooses sides. Some people see Wiltshire as brave. Others see him as a bully from London. And in the background, there is the body of a little boy. A child who cannot speak for himself. The case moves toward a hearing. Evidence is demanded. And evidence, in this case, is thin. Suspicion is not proof. A missing nightdress is not a confession. If Wiltshire cannot build a solid chain, he will not just lose the case. He will discredit the entire idea of the detective. So what does Wiltshire actually have beyond instinct? Quick recap. Here's what we know so far, and the one detail that still doesn't fit. A family friend offers a simple explanation that would end the scandal instantly, and the newspapers love it. So why does Wiltshire treat that comforting theory as his first red flag? Let's zoom out to London, because Wiltshire isn't just investigating a death, he's testing a brand new idea of policing. And one wrong call will make that idea toxic. The inquest and early proceedings do not produce what Wiltshire needs. Witnesses speak, they contradict themselves, they soften, they forget. The household closes ranks in subtle ways, not as a conspiracy with a plan, more like a shared refusal to let the private become public. And the Victorian public is hungry. Newspapers describe the corridors. They describe the nursery. They describe the nursery. They describe her face, her posture, her manner, as if guilt can be read like handwriting. But the law demands more. And in the end, the case against Constance does not hold. Not enough to commit her for trial. The suspicion remains. Yet the machinery stops. Wiltshire is left exposed, a detective who has pointed at the wrong person, or a detective who has seen the truth and cannot prove it. Either way, the story shifts. Now Wiltshire becomes the subject. His methods are attacked. His character is questioned. People ask if detectives create crimes in their imagination. They ask if these new men of inquiry are a danger to the innocent. Wiltshire's career takes a blow. His health suffers. And the murder of Francis Saville Kent remains officially unsolved. A little body in a privy and a nation arguing about manners. But if Constance did not do it, then who did? And if she did, how could the truth stay hidden in plain sight? Wiltshire isolates one suspect, and suddenly the case stops being about murder and becomes about class. If the suspect is untouchable, how does a detective prove anything without destroying himself? Years pass. Road Hill House is still there. The family continues, but not unchanged. The children grow. The servants move on. And in the wider world, the idea of the detective keeps developing. Professional policing expands. Record-keeping improves. People begin, slowly, to accept that some crimes are solved not by confession or chance, but by persistent observation. And yet this case lingers like a stain, because it sits at a crossroads. Old England and new. Local and metropolitan. Honor and evidence. Wiltshire retreats from the public eye. To many, he is the man who accused a girl and failed. To others, he is the man who nearly named the unnameable, a murderer within the family. But the story does not end with Wiltshire's failure. The truth, when it comes, will not come through clever inference. It will come through something far rarer. Someone deciding, after years of silence, to speak. What could possibly make a person carry a secret like this for so long, and then, finally, let it go? Quick recap. Here's what we know so far, and the one detail that still doesn't fit. The local police think Wiltshire is arrogant, the family thinks he's insulting, and London wants results yesterday. So what happens when a detective's best lead is also the one accusation he's not allowed to make? Here's the turn. The evidence doesn't collapse when people lie. It becomes sharper, and one lie in particular is about to point straight at the person telling it. In 1865, 5 years after the murder, Constance Kent does something unexpected. She confesses. Not in a dramatic courtroom moment, not with a crowd roaring outside. She confesses to a clergyman, a Catholic priest, and then, step by step, the confession makes its way to the authorities. The country shudders, because the suspicion that could not be proven is suddenly spoken aloud. Constance admits she killed her little half-brother. She says she took him from his bed. She says she cut his throat. She says she hid him. The details matter now. They match too well. They fill gaps in ways only the killer could. The confession reopens everything, not just the case, but the moral argument that surrounded it. If she is telling the truth, then Wiltshire was right. And if Wiltshire was right, then the country's outrage was aimed at the only man who saw clearly. But confession creates new questions. Why confess now? Why not sooner? And why choose a priest protected by vows as the first witness to her words? A missing object seems trivial next to a dead child, until Wiltshire realizes it's the only thing that could place the killer inside the house at the exact moment. Who handled it, and who's pretending they didn't? The legal system faces an awkward problem. A confession to a priest is not a simple thing in Victorian England. There are debates about privilege, about whether the priest can be forced to repeat what he heard, about whether the state can reach into the confessional. Meanwhile, Constance is arrested. She is questioned. She repeats her confession in formal terms. The press reignites, but the tone changes. Now the story is not only about the death of a child, it is about a young woman's mind, about family cruelty, about jealousy, about inheritance, about the second wife, about everything polite society tries not to say out loud. Constance's motives are argued over in public as if she were a character in a novel. Some people insist she must be mad. Some insist she must be evil. Some insist she must have been driven. Constance herself offers a motive that feels narrow and yet horrifying. She speaks of hatred for her stepmother. She suggests the child was a proxy target, a way to wound the new family order. It is chilling because it is emotionally legible, and because it means the murder was not a sudden loss of control. It was a message, but if the motive is hatred, where did that hatred come from? And what was it fed on inside Road Hill House? When Wiltshire pushes harder, the story shifts from who killed the boy to who is framing whom. If someone is manipulating the investigation, what are they trying to protect? A person or a secret? Stop thinking like a detective for a moment. Think like someone who needs the case to end quickly, because that motive changes who the best suspect really is. The case goes to trial. The court must decide what to do with a confession that arrives late, and with a crime that has already been argued to death in newspapers. Constance is convicted. The sentence is severe. Then it is commuted, because the Victorian state is both punitive and cautious. It wants justice, but it also wants to appear humane. The public consumes every detail. A girl from a respectable home. A murder done with a razor. A body hidden in a privy. A detective who was shamed. A confession that arrives like a ghost. And under all of it, The unsettling sense that the home is not safe simply because it is well built and well furnished. For Wiltshire, the confession is vindication. But it is not a clean victory. He has spent years carrying a case that made him infamous. He is proven correct, but the damage was already done. In the public imagination, he becomes a figure of the new policing. Necessary, intrusive, human, fallible, and the story becomes larger than any one person. It becomes a parable about how truth is found. By who? Wolf. Quick recap. Here's what we know so far, and the one detail that still doesn't fit. A witness remembers a detail late, conveniently late, after hearing the gossip spreading through the village. Is this memory the key, or the first planted lie that can't be unplanted? To understand why this murder made detectives, you have to feel the time. In mid-Victorian Britain, crime is changing. Cities are growing. Railways compress distance. Newspapers compress scandal. And the public wants order. But it also fears surveillance. The detective embodies that tension. A man without uniform. A man who blends in. A man who asks questions polite people do not want asked. Before detectives, many crimes are solved through community knowledge, through reputations, through who is considered the sort who would do such a thing. Wiltshire represents a different logic. Not who you are, but what you did. Where you could have been, what the physical world allows. In Road Hill House, this logic points toward the family, and the family is sacred, so the backlash is not only about evidence, it is about insult. It is about class. It is about the fear that any home could be opened like a box and inspected. This is why the case becomes a national argument, not because it is the first child murder, but because it forces a choice. Do you protect the appearance of respectability, or do you pursue truth wherever it leads? And if you choose truth, who gets to do the pursuing? Wiltshire's evidence is partly invisible. Pauses, glances, and what people won't say in front of each other. But if the truth lives in silence, how do you prove it in court? We're going to rewind the night in 30 seconds, because one door, one candle, and one missing minute are about to decide whether Wiltshire is brilliant or reckless. Wiltshire's methods look familiar now. Reconstruct the timeline. Test the alibis. Map the house. Follow the missing object. Notice the behavior that does not fit. But at the time, these are not universally admired. They are feared because they imply that private life is subject to public inspection. They imply that women and children can be suspects. They imply that servants may be witnesses against masters. The Road Hill case also shows a problem that still exists. A detective can be right and still lose, because the courtroom is not the same as the crime scene. Suspicion may be accurate, but accuracy is not enough. Wiltshire, in effect, runs ahead of what the institutions can hold. He names the likely killer before he can present an airtight chain, and the system punishes him for it. Then, when the confession arrives, the system quietly benefits. It takes the solved case, it takes the closure, and it leaves the detective as a complicated figure, neither hero nor villain. Just a man doing a new kind of work in a society not ready to be looked at closely. So is the lesson that Wiltshire should have waited for proof, or that the world should have learned to listen sooner. A new suspect emerges who satisfies everyone's prejudice perfectly, and the public relaxes. So why does Wiltshire get more worried the moment the crowd feels certain? There is another reason this case endures. It reads like fiction. A country house. A dead child. a suspicious daughter, a stern detective from London, a scandal that spreads through papers like smoke. And then, years later, a confession. It is no accident that writers and historians keep returning to it, because it helps create a template. The closed circle, the domestic mystery. The idea that the answer is inside the room, not outside. In that sense, Road Hill House is not only a crime scene, it is a stage on which modern detection is rehearsed. You can draw a line from this case to the detective stories that will follow, to the fascination with motive, with psychology, with hidden family wars. But the real story is rougher than fiction. A real child died. A real girl destroyed her life. A real investigator was publicly torn apart. And the truth did not arrive through brilliance alone. It arrived through time, through pressure, through conscience, or through something darker. So when we say, this murder made detectives, what do we mean? Are we celebrating a profession, or admitting that society needed a new kind of intruder to face what it did not want to see? Jonathan Wiltshire lives long enough to see the idea of the detective become more accepted. He also lives with what this case did to him. He is remembered as a pioneer and as a warning. Because the Road Hill murder shows that detection is not only about clues, it is about permission. Permission to suspect, permission to ask, permission to disrupt. Wiltshire disrupted a family. He disrupted a village's preferred story. He disrupted a nation's belief about where evil comes from. And for that, he paid. The murder of Francis Saville Kent remains a small tragedy with a large shadow. It helped reshape policing. It helped reshape policing public appetite for investigation. It helped reshape the boundary between private life and public truth, but it also leaves a final discomfort. If a confession had never come, Wiltshire would have remained the man who failed. The story would have hardened against him, and the killer would have walked through life with a secret. So here is the question that still hangs in the corridors of Road Hill House. In the cases where there is no confession, no final admission, no last-minute truth, how often are the Wiltshires right and how often are they ruined anyway?